every job I've gotten in the funeral service, I've never done before, but I always have told myself, say yes, and then figure it out. And so far, it's kind of worked out for me. And then I spent the last 15 years prior to joining Fairmount in 2018, last 15 years of my career being a general manager. We lived in Seattle at the time, so a couple of facilities over there. And then I got transferred to Spokane with my former employer to run the funeral homes here. And then I got recruited by the competitor to join them because I think that was the smartest strategy, I think, for Fairmount was to take your competitor out by hiring them, right? So I have a pretty smart CEO.
Welcome to the Direct Cremation Podcast with your hosts, Tyler Yamasaki and Will DeMichaelis. Hi, thank you for joining us on the Direct Cremation Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Yamasaki, CEO of Parting Pro. And as always, I'm here with my co-host, Will DeMichaelis, funeral home consultant and former manager of the Omega Society, a cremation brand that served over 4,500 families per year at its peak. And as always, you can find links to both of our products and services below. So today's guest spent almost 2 decades at SCI, cutting her teeth in Deathcare. However, since leaving in 2018, she has since been the president of the Washington Cemetery, Crematory, and Funeral Association, a current board member of the Cremation Association of North America, a founding member of the Deathcare Collective, and in her spare time, the chief operating officer of the Fairmount Memorial Association, where she manages a collection of 7 memorial parks and cemeteries, and I think a few cremation brands. She may not be the loudest speaker, but her actions and accomplishments speak volumes. Please welcome Sandra Walker to the podcast.
Hi, you guys.
Sandra.
Hi
Hello.
there. Thanks
Hi,
for
Sandra.
having me.
Welcome. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
We just came back from NFDA. I feel like that's the only time I actually get to see you, but I see you at a lot of the shows.
Yes. It's only my second time at an FDA. And, I go to different shows. I mean, obviously CANA. And NFDA just seems like fun. Like there's tons of people. And I'm an introvert, so it's always out of my comfort zone. I just love the expo hall. Like that's my favorite part about NFDA, just walking the halls and looking at what's new and innovative out there in our profession. And then, of course, meeting my friends like you, Tyler. I always joke that it's
I definitely
my time
feel
to go
that. And there's
see my
always like this
friends.
weird, like meeting at shows, there's really no other relationship kind of like that because it's like you kind of pick up right where you left off 6 months ago or something. And it's like this weird understanding where, there's this big gap, but we see each other at these shows and we're always friendly. And you kind of do like just meet your friends at the shows.
I'm new to the scene as well, and I found that to be the case. It's just really nice to be there every time. Yeah, it's been well received for me, seeing everybody and how everybody interacts at those events. I've never been to NFDA, so I like hearing it secondhand. I'm hoping to go next year.
And it's just a great reminder, too, that we have kind and compassionate people that makes up our profession. And it just always feels me emotionally after I go back home. I kind of miss all my friends. And then I just realize so much talent and so much people doing so much good.
Yeah, it's definitely a good time. And you definitely get to meet people. And it definitely reminds you, I think, of why you're here and what you're doing. But speaking of you've actually accomplished quite a bit so far. And we highlighted some of that in your intro, but could you maybe give us a background in your own words about your journey in Deathcare to where you are now?
It's very unconventional. It's kind of funny. I look back at the last almost 25 years and really Deathcare was not something that was on my radar or I didn't want to be in Deathcare. I actually grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I graduated from Simon Fraser University. My degree was in criminology, double minored in political science. And my goal was to be an attorney. And so it was a 4-year degree that I did in 3, because if anybody knows where Simon Fraser University is, it's on a mountain. And I realized I didn't want to take the bus up the mountain for 4 years. So I did it in 3. And when I graduated, I wanted to take a break before I did my LSATs, because then that was the next step to go to law school. And I had a friend that worked for a temporary agency, and she said, "Why don't you temp like just do some temping work. And I was like, cool. At the time I was 22 years old. And so I decided to take a 1 week project with a group called the Lowen Group. And it was a really monotonous project. We had to transfer files from the Philadelphia office that they were closing back to Vancouver. It was the payroll department. So my first desk in funeral service was the lunchroom on the 7th floor of the Metro Towers in this payroll office. And there was 4 temps and they said it would be a week. So I started in 98, March 1999. I was still there. So I'm like, this is the longest week ever. And I guess the other temps were turning over because it was a very boring job. And here I was a graduate with a degree and I'm doing minimal task of alphabetizing people's files, employees, A, B, C, creating new files. But I think the payroll manager recognized that maybe because I stuck it out, that I should become a payroll clerk. So then I decided to do that because it was still within my time frame of the year that I was going to take before I went to law school. And then it just kind of continued from there. I became a payroll officer, and that's how I got introduced to funeral service, really that way, because I did payroll for the Western United States for the Lowen Group at the time. And I met a senior vice president named Sean Phillips, and I was his payroll officer. And I just began to develop relationships with all the funeral home managers, right? Like they call me if somebody's paycheck is not right, if they have to terminate someone. So I started to just ask questions like, what is it like in the field? And the stories were so intriguing that I was like, hey, I'm still within my year. And then I got to develop a relationship with Sean. And so I jokingly said one day, I want to move to Washington. And I didn't really think anything of it. But then he called me up and he said, we have an opening in Washington. Would you like to come? And so I was like, okay. So then the company had the attorney do all of my immigration paperwork. And I remember taking the packet and there was no guarantee that I would get a work visa because you need a work visa to work in the United States. And at the time, I didn't know how to drive, right? So I took the tourist bus with my work visa and there was like 50 other people on the bus. And I go to the border and I am holding up this bus because now I have to go to immigration to get my visa approved. And I just remember the guy saying, an L1B off the freaking bus. Like I remember that, like the customs officer, the immigration officer, he was not happy. But for some reason, he stamped it approved. And mind you, to get an L1B, it has to be a job that no other person in America can do. And what I ended up doing was being an administrator at a funeral home and cemetery in Seattle. And then from there, I continued to just work and learn I had great mentors. The location manager there, who's a really good friend of mine now, Henry Kearns, really mentored me and shaped me as a young person. I had great funeral directors that taught me a lot about funeral service. I remember seeing my first decedent and I was like, can't do this. Like, I can't do this. So things just continued to grow for me. And I think it was just because I was young and I took risks. And when I think about it now, I was like, how did I get here? So it's just kind of funny how my career started. So I was never, every job I've gotten in the funeral service, I've never done before, but I always have told myself, say yes, and then figure it out. And so far it's kind of worked out for me. And then I spent the last 15 years prior to joining Fairmount in 2018, last 15 years of my career being a general manager for we lived in Seattle at the time. So a couple of facilities over there. And then I got transferred to Spokane with my former employer to run the funeral homes here. And then I got recruited by the competitor to join them because I think, quite frankly, that was the smartest strategy, I think, for Fairmount was to take your competitor out by hiring them, right? So I have a pretty smart CEO.
Yeah. Good move.
That's just a synopsis, but very interesting. I don't know. Sometimes I look back and I say to myself, I think the profession found me because I wanted to be an attorney, like since I was 7.
You're
But I ran
actually
out
the
of money
second
too,
person
so.
we've talked to on the podcast this week that wanted to be a lawyer first and then found their way into Deathcare.
Yep. You're not alone.
Yeah.
You know?
So I don't know. So maybe hopeful lawyers turned Deathcare professionals are the success playbook to being successful Deathcare people.
I guess maybe sometimes when you're having to look at the RCWs and the WACs and the laws, I was like, oh, I get to play kind of a lawyer.
Yeah. So basically, a chance temp job turned into an entire career into Deathcare, into a country that you weren't even necessarily planning to be working in.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah, that is correct. And I think it just comes down to one person believing in me. When I look back at my career, and I tell him all the time when I have the opportunity, but he never gave up on me, because there was a point in my career where I lost my work visa. They wouldn't renew it. And he could have just said, thanks for your service, and we wish you well in Canada and good luck. But he stuck by me, and I had to move back to Canada for a while. He took good care of me when I lost my job, had to give up my home. I had to give up everything I had known for the last 3 years and move back to Canada, because in order to go through the immigration process, you got to go back to your home. When you're under appeal, you had to go back to your country of origin. But all of that worked out, because then somewhere in there I met my husband. So I ended up coming back on a spousal visa.
Yeah.
So I jokingly say to my husband, you're my
That's
green
great.
card husband. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess it's kind of a fun story now when I look back, but I didn't really think of it being different, because I was literally jobless and homeless. But this man, and then Beth Wagner, who was our controller, these two people stood by me and believed in me. They believed in me more than I ever believed in myself.
Great story to tell for this podcast, because we talk a lot about managing. We talk a lot about leadership. We talk a lot about knowing what your best people need and delivering on that as an owner or a manager. And your story is a testament to how great that can work out. And that's beautiful to see. You're an executive at a company. And if that hadn't happened, you'd be in Canada.
Yes.
Yeah.
Putting
maple syrup in your car. Yeah.
I've been very fortunate and blessed. And I remember that as I try to lead as well and do for others how others have done.
I know that story sounds very much like you had a lot of help and you had a lot of support, but I think that seeing what you've accomplished so far in Deathcare, I definitely know that that's because you were the person to solve problems, and you were, the person to get things done. So I think you tell it with a very humble edge, but I know that there was definitely accomplishment and hard work there that got you to where you are.
Absolutely.
But yeah. So being at a company and obviously I think the whole SCI versus type of mentality is one that, runs deep within Deathcare and Deathcare providers and everyone. But as someone who spent a large part of their career at SCI and then moving on to seeming to really excel after that, do you feel like you learned a lot working at SCI that prepared you to later do well at smaller companies or starting other initiatives and working for CANA and things like that?
I had a great career with SCI, and I'm very thankful for everything I learned. And when you think of an organization, I think you think the leadership is what makes you describe an organization, right? And because, SCI is a name, but your experience is based on those around you and your leaders. And I had amazing, amazing leaders that gave me opportunities to learn It's a great organization when you're a brand new manager, the tools, the resources. So I learned a lot in there. And one of the things that really sparked my interest and began my journey of being an entrepreneur and being able to utilize creativity and all of that have served me well here now was starting a storefront for them here in Spokane before I left. And doing that process, the creative process and the independent thinking, I think really set me up well for transitioning into a smaller organization with not as many resources and tools. So I'm very grateful for that experience. And it's a great
That's nice to hear.
organization.
It's nice to give credit where it's due. And especially with how your career turned out, you certainly owe a lot to them. And you have an array of accomplishments at every place that you've worked. And any of those accomplishments can really stand on their own. But you continue to grow and do more and more. What continues this drive within you in Deathcare?
That's a good question. Probably because of my parents. I mean, I'm Asian, so you got to do well.
I feel you. Yeah.
I'm joking. But my parents have strong work ethics. And I think, I describe myself as somebody who's tenacious, and my husband kind of describes it perfect. It's what makes me successful is because I'm always wanting to learn. I love learning. I was just thinking this morning, if I had enough money to not have to work, I'd be a lifelong student. I was always a very good student, and I just strive to learn and learn from others and learn specifically from those not like me, because I think they make you better and they provide a different perspective. So I think it's just, I have this internal drive and maybe this critic in my head that says it's never good enough.
It's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword.
But I think it's just that internal. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Right. Yes. But it's never good enough for me. And so it is a double-edged sword because it can be frustrating for those around.
I think that definitely leads to your success as well, though, right? That's definitely a driver. What is your ethnic cultural background?
So thanks for asking. So I know everybody always wonders that. So my paternal grandpa is Chinese. So my mom is Chinese and Samoan. And then my dad is South Indian. So his heritage is from India, but I was born in the Fiji Islands and then immigrated to Canada when I was 9. So, well, that is a different race, but that would be the nationality. So I would say that I'm half Indian, Chinese, and Samoan.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of folks say I'm Fijian because,
Yeah.
But Fijians are different.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, I don't think I would have ever guessed that, but that is a very diverse mix.
Yeah. You should ask my kids because they're even more confused than I am.
Sure, okay.
We're just having that conversation of who am I, right? Like, so they're trying to figure out how do they fit in because their dad is German, Scottish, also mixed. I'm like,
how old are your kids?
Just who you are. Yeah.
Ooh.
14 and 11. Yes. Hard age.
Wow.
Two girls.
Yeah.
So I have
sometimes
yes.
Balancing the kids and the work ends up being the easier part.
Yes. It's challenging. And, this is kind of where the Deathcare Collective comes in to play and my passion for that organization. It's just a different challenge being a working mom and the guilt that goes with it. Maybe it was so weird. So many years ago, this pastor had come in to do a service and he made the comment that I would sell my children for corporate or something like that. Something crazy. Like it was just crazy. It was really crazy comment. And that just resonated with me. They think differently of women in leadership. He
Oh,
wouldn't
wow.
have said that to a male counterpart, right? So I thought that was interesting, his comment, like almost like you're a mom. Because I had just recently, when he had come in, I just had my oldest daughter at the time, and he just made that comment, and I didn't really understand at the time what he was alluding to till I reflected
Yeah.
back, and I was like,
Yeah.
Let's
why
talk
would you
about the
say that?
Deathcare Collective. What is the mission of
hmm
the Deathcare Collective, and why did you start it?
So it's kind of a really interesting journey. So there's 9 of us in it. Was probably the last founding member to join, and my friend Olga Pila, my best friend Olga Pila, was the one that kind of introduced me to the other ladies. And I think it really started with Olga and Aaron Krieger, which is the other founding member. They started to have virtual coffee during COVID because for a lot of folks that worked remotely, that isolation and that feeling of loneliness and sense of connection. So they were just on LinkedIn interacting with each other, didn't really know each other. And then it started with a virtual coffee date between the two of them. And then this just grew into a book club. And then it just grew into like, let's create something called the Deathcare Collective. And it's really about empowering women and uplifting each other and just providing that support, right? So everybody, men or women in the profession, needs some kind of support, but we recognize that there's a space maybe that women need a little bit more support. And, people are like, oh, you're anti-men or whatever. And that is not the case. It's really, one doesn't have to exist void of the other, right? But I think it's just really about those that want to be part of a community, those that have the same struggles with some of us, like founding members. We have imposter syndrome, right? There's others that probably have that. A lot of us have children and we're trying to work and trying to be funeral directors and trying to adhere to the hard schedule that is expected of funeral directors to go do removals at night. But then you have children at home sleeping. And how do you do that? So it's just really about creating resources, education, mentorship, and sponsorship. Because I think, one of the things I did a certification of women in leadership with Gonzaga University here in Spokane in 2021. And one of the things that really resonated with me is women tend to be overly mentored, but never sponsored. And really the difference is sponsorship is putting women in connection with other people that can help them grow their careers. So part of that is where the networking comes in and introducing our members to maybe potential employers and trying to elevate women into leadership roles. Because, studies have shown companies that hire women in higher positions tend to do better. So we're all about helping our members grow and meeting them where they're at because everybody has different needs, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like a sisterhood. And it's kind of funny because we just didn't know what would come of it because it was just something that the 9 women needed and we thought we'd share it with others. So like we'll do virtual events. We've done several amazing virtual events and typically 20 to 30 women will attend these virtual events. And I think the benefit of our virtual events is not necessarily the content, but the time to do breakout sessions and just engage with each other. And I can say through the Deathcare Collective, I've met a lot of amazing women that I would have never met because we live in different parts of our country. And I just think it's a great community now and everybody's supporting each other and confidence and confidentiality is something so important to this group.
Yeah.
So it's building trust.
I think that's a really valuable resource that you guys are creating, especially considering as we see the demographic of the incoming class of mortuary students, funeral directors entering death care, especially because right now, the positions of power are still held kind of by the old guard and the old way of thinking of, I'd say, quote unquote, traditional way of thinking, I guess. So something like that to provide for, what's going to be the majority of the workforce in death care is definitely something is going to be super important, if not already.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, right? Because they say like 80% of students in mortuary school are women, but yet there's this gap of us trying to find employees and trying to fill our positions. There's a shortage. And so it's like, where are they going? Where are all these graduates going?
I'd be interested to know. I don't know how many total graduates of mortuary science there are per year. I imagine there's not enough to fill every vacant job in the industry, which is something that I've always championed, recruiting outside the industry. There are plenty of really empathetic, compassionate people that can be trained in this type of customer service in any part of the death care process. You can fit. I mean, even you started as a temp, and we had people at Omega that started as temps that we brought on. They ended up liking the structure of the work and it resonated with them. They got a hang of it and they said, this is cool. So that's I wish was more open to people just from the employee side. For those currently in mortuary school, I was interested to hear that 50% of them aren't in the field 5 years after they graduate, which is sad. If you're going to go through this education process, take the time, spend the money, and then within a few years you realize it's not for you, that's a shame. And I think that's also something that you talked about, being mentored. I think some of these people get into, they're the 22-year-old and they don't have a mentor or someone that believes in them at their first job. And that puts a sour taste in their mouth. And then we've lost a compassionate, empathetic person who's like willing to help families. They were called to help families. And because of other circumstances in that workplace, it caused them to leave. And I think that's a terrible way to lose good people.
I agree with you. And we have to think about, we talk about work-life balance, but I also learned during this certification, it's not really work-life balance, because when you hear balance, it's like you have to juggle things and not drop something, right? When you think of balancing, but it's more work-life integration. And I think our profession, at least I know for me personally, I really struggle with that because the level of responsibility I have in trying to disengage. And, for 19 years, it was like working all day and then going home and doing emails and all of that. And with our current organization, what I really appreciate is our CEO is a big proponent of that work-life integration and really teaching. This is where I've actually not felt guilty to not like work after hours if I don't have to. I understand my level of responsibility, but it's always nice to step away. And so we've got to think about that for our funeral directors, right? How do we create a schedule that's, and maybe not always able to do in smaller operations because they have to do removals all night and then come in and make arrangements still, right? But we have to think in terms of the burnout, right? And mentorship is important.
You said something really important, which is you have to manage for that burnout. And if you don't, you're going to hurt your own business in the short, medium, and long term. But I see it all the time. I still see it all the time. And I think in the future, the management teams at these businesses that do understand that work-life integration are going to recruit and keep the best people. And they're going to have the best ratings online. They're going to have the best family reviews, and they're going to grow, and they're going to be the future.
I agree. It's going to come down to what makes the difference between this provider and the other, right? Like we all offer the same combination of things for the FTC, but the difference is the experience and our people, right? And how we leave a customer to feel after we've served them. And so while recruiting is so challenging right now, I think it's also important to balance that with a healthy culture or healthy work culture and not allowing behaviors that are disruptive to the culture and retaining folks just because you can't find someone else. Like we have that one rule that we will not sacrifice culture regardless of whether we can find staffing or not.
I think that's probably some of the most sound hiring advice we've heard on the show. Really? Yeah. I mean, hire slow, fire fast. I wish more. I think I mean, Omega definitely guilty of it. And I saw the effect on culture. So I can attest to what you're saying is absolutely true. And it goes on in every business, but I think death care businesses have a higher likelihood of this happening just because there are so many small businesses, small family businesses. That happens a lot.
And I think it's important to remember too, when you're working in a very small business, a family small business, your associates are not your family members. So you've got to treat them in a very special way, because typically you can't divorce your family members, right? But your employees that are not related to you can divorce you. So there are some things that we have to reflect back on, and regardless of what size business we're in or who owns it or who runs it, at the end of the day, we're all people, and we can't forget that. We have to be seen separate from our titles. We have to understand that when somebody walks in the door, we don't know what happened 8 hours before. And so we've got to get down to that deep human level of those we work with and around. And I've learned a lot about that this summer working with our seasonal grounds team, and just the stories, the amazing human stories. I learned a lot that it's important to see past the person that's in front of you and go deep.
For the Deathcare Collective, do you guys have like future plans and initiatives that you're trying to do, or is it sounded like it kind of formed, by happenstance, but it sounds like now there's like plans. So could you maybe give us a sneak peek of what to look out for?
Yeah. So the amazing thing is when you bring 9 leaders and 9 drivers to the table, things are going to happen, right? And there's going to always have to be progress, no matter what club or group or whatever it is you belong in, you want to see progress. And we just have begun a strategic planning sessions for 2023, the remainder of 2023 and 2024. And one of the things that we've just established is kind of the leadership, the formal, because, we were great. We were able to collaborate as 9 leaders, but we realized that there's got to be a little bit of a hierarchy because we're trying to formalize our group a little bit. So we determined who was going to be the chair for the next year, vice chair. So we've started to establish some roles. I had to take a little bit of a step back while I'm actively involved. I didn't want a level of responsibility in the group, recognizing my capacity and bandwidth with my current priorities. And so the leadership team, they're probably going to post it on our website soon. So when they formally announce it, then you will know who the leaders are. But we're really focused on membership. So the priority is membership and membership engagement, and ensuring that we are providing what our members need. And then the other piece is, and there's going to be different events. The big one that's coming up, actually, we're collaborating with ICCFA in the fall, which is in October in Arizona. It's called the Leadership Summit. So a year ago, ICCA approached us and asked if we wanted to collaborate. And so we thought it was a great opportunity to maybe help kind of form maybe what the contents might be, what might be helpful for our members. So if folks are wanting to attend something a little bit different than the normal conventions and hear speakers regarding leadership, I think it's going to be a great event. So I encourage people to attend. But education, like bringing education to the forefront for our members and resources, is kind of our focus. But no matter what we're going to do, we're going to stay true to our core values. We have very specific core values and our mission, right? So how do we know we're doing well? How do we know we're progressing? It's when we're working and keeping our vision and values aligned and making sure to the forefront, right? And so the idea is to empower and strengthen and collaborate. So everything we're going to do in the next year is going to be based around those
is
core
the leadership
principles.
Female only, or is it open to everyone?
Yeah, so it's made up of our 9 founding members. So we're starting with the founding members, but we recognize that we're all so busy that we're going to start to form like subcommittees and engage other women, because other women have asked us like, hey, how can I get more involved? How can I help? And we have so many talented people that follow us and engage with us and is part of our membership. And so we want to create space at the table for everyone that wants to get involved. And like I said, we're just starting to form that because like we just like did this thing and didn't really know what this thing was. And then we realized it's a thing. And so we're in the process of like hitting the restart button and trying to formalize it. So eventually down the road, we'll officially become a nonprofit.
Cool. And the Leadership Summit, is that open to
everyone? So anybody that's a member of the ICCFA, and I'm sure even non-members can attend.
I'm excited to see what's in store for you all, because that's actually sounds something that's going to be big, or can be big, and can be really powerful for the workforce of Deathcare. So
yeah, and I think if we continue to put our members at the forefront before ourselves, we can do amazing things, and that is kind of our goal.
It's the best attitude.
Others before
take you far. Yeah.
Moving on to more of an established association that you're a part of. You are an active CANA board member right now. So can you kind of explain what a CANA board member, like what the role of a CANA board member is and what you do with CANA?
I can explain how I view it. If it's not, I guess, right? So yes, so we just finished our annual conference in Washington, D.C. It was my first time. That was amazing. And during that convention, I have now elevated to third vice president. So I will become CANA president in 2027, the year my oldest graduates from high school. So, and quite frankly, it's intimidating, and I don't feel like I'm quite ready to take on this responsibility, but our CANA board members are amazing people who are very kind, very supportive. So I feel very comforted in stepping into that role and learning lots. And so I think for CANA board members, of course, like any board you sit on, is to do good for the association and give advice and help the staff in whatever their goals are and provide the support and input and participate and contribute to whatever the strategic plans are for the association, right? And so it's to actively be involved to support the association and provide whatever insight you may find helpful.
What can we look forward to, besides you being president, toward for CANA in the near future?
I think, one of the things that CANA is well known for is its research as an association, right? That's one of the reasons I fell in love with CANA, is the educational aspect that an approach it takes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also
Don't we all? We love Barbara.
Yes. So she was like the main reason I wanted to join CANA. I got to spend some amazing time with Barbara before I was on the board, and it was kind of fun because I had invited her out when I was the president of the state association to do some talks. And that was just as our state was shutting down during COVID. And I just got to know her, and I was like, how do I stay connected to this lady? Yeah. Like, I'm fanning her. Like, how do I stay connected? So I just raised my hand and said, I want to be on your board. I didn't even know what that meant. And because I just wanted to still be friends with Barbara. And Barbara is a thoughtful leader. She's very articulate, very intelligent. I always speak to her, and I always walk away learning something from her. And so her vision for CANA and her strategic planning, like we're focusing on what is a big concern for everyone, this licensing, this hiring of people, right? It's one of the initiatives we're working on. There's other strategic plans that we're working on, and I apologize, I left that all out of my brain till the next CANA meeting. And again, like I said, like I don't know what I can share, right? But yeah, just one of the strategic plans is like we're brainstorming, trying to figure out how to advance the profession.
Love Barbara here. She's her personality is just I don't know, just it's
She's
it
electric.
attracts you
She's
to her.
great.
You wanna
Yeah.
you wanna work with her. You wanna talk to her. That's just kind
Yeah.
of how it is.
Yes.
Would you say someone that was looking to get more involved?
Yes.
Would you recommend, because you've been president of the state association, now CANA, kind of creating, I know it's a collective and it's small now, but you're kind of creating and part of the founding of, I would assume, going to be another association at some point. Do you feel like that is a good way to make a larger impact on death care than just maybe being an owner or a funeral director?
Yeah. So how do you affect change, right? You got to get involved depending on what your passion is and what interests you and where you think you can affect change. You definitely want to get involved with the local groups, even the associations, right? That's a good start. I don't know about the other associations and how difficult it is to get on the boards, but if you can, like for CANA, a great way to start with us, and if you're not sure, is joining the different committees. So the committees are made up of non-board members as well. So that's a good way to explore. That's how I started. I started on a committee with CANA before I became a board member. So there's different ways that you can get involved.
Okay.
And
Speaking of change, there was recently a 5-hour FTC panel, and we were talking earlier, and you said you watched the whole thing. Can't honestly say that I watched the whole thing, but there's a lot of changes happening. What do you, from your perspective, as someone who's kind of seen a lot of different parts of death care, what do you think some of the more relevant things are that they're kind of proposing, and what kind of impact do you think that'll actually have on death care going forward?
Well, I think the first panel really spoke about posting your prices online, right? And there's two sides to that discussion. Of course, for the consumer, the argument could be transparency, and everybody shops online, right? Since COVID, how many of us have signed up for Amazon? I never used to shop on Amazon till after COVID, during COVID and after COVID. So I can see that perspective when you're trying to look up in a business and trying to see what something costs. Maybe it's frustrating if it's not online, but also from a funeral provider perspective, it could create a bit of a disadvantage too, I think, in some ways, because our price lists are so, I believe that the general public who only makes this decision maybe once in their lifetime, if they're lucky, and interact with us only when they need to, maybe won't understand what all these line items mean on a GPL. And so when you're posting prices online without any kind of context, the danger for me, or at least my personal view, is, are they just comparing? Maybe it wasn't about price, but then because they go online and you can see everybody's prices, they're just picking the provider based on price without really calling and talking to the providers. So are there going to be missed opportunities?
That's actually
I
a
don't
really
know. Those are just
good
something
point.
I think of.
Right? We talk about transparency, but what that does is that just forces price transparency, and not even real transparency, but it doesn't mean that just because I know your price, I know everything about your business.
It's also like, even with GPLs, like across GPLs, if you take 5 company GPLs and ask like arrangers at the different firms to say how much a service would cost, they wouldn't even be able to do it. And they've probably worked in the industry for 5 to 10 years. It's just how you label things, how you structure things, what you're actually agreeing to when you say like delivering the casket to the graveside. Like, it's just, you kind of get into semantics, and you don't know if you're comparing apples to apples when just reading a GPL. And even industry professionals who have experience, I don't think would feel comfortable speaking on another company's GPL and how they structure their pricing conversations and those arrangement conversations. It's so different from company to company. That's something that I wish would kind of get cleared up, kind of the terminology kind of being standardized, so that when people do read like the name of a service, it's consistent around like their area and in their community. I don't see that happening now. I think GPLs are convoluted and tough to read.
I agree. And besides the minimum, the direct cremation, direct burial, forwarding of remains and receiving of remains, everything else is a la carte. So how does the family know how to piece together the different charges and come up with a total on their own? Right. And so the other concern is like, what if you're the only provider in your hometown? So you don't need a website because everybody knows you. And are you going to be required to create a website to be in compliance? What does that cost to that provider? When you talk about equality and equity, it's just kind of interesting to me. It's almost like, why fix something that's not broken?
Because there has to be universal standards at some level. And I think that's what they're trying to do. It's like these are going to be weird growing pains as we kind of establish that infrastructure or a new infrastructure. The rural, like mom and pop storefront that like everyone knows in town is a unique example. I'm interested to see how they handle that, because there are tons and tons of those businesses in middle America and everywhere.
And one of the panelists, I think, or what I recall from that conversation was like, okay, then do you have to pay money for paid searches? Then SEO, the biggest wallets will be able to then bring your funeral home to the forefront, right? And when people are searching, and how many funeral homes does a customer search before they make a decision? So there's so many things. I can see both sides. It will definitely be interesting.
Do you have an opinion or a want? I mean, you are a funeral. I would call you almost like an owner of a funeral business, or many of them actually. So, do you have a opinion one way or the other?
So I've got two different brands, right? I've got a traditional funeral home, and then I've got what we call storefronts here in Washington State. So folks that specialize, our brand, Pacific Northwest Cremation, specializes in mostly direct cremation consumers, mostly do-it-yourself consumers. And I think for that brand specifically, we use Parting Pros right now. I'm in the process of now implementing that in my traditional funeral home. But I think if you're going to post it online, I would like to see it kind of in that format where you're posting your price list, but then you're walking the family through how 100%. To build their, what they want. Because then that puts it in context. Like walk them through, like, here's the questions we ask you, you answer yes or no, and here's the product. So not just posting the GPL, but maybe having some kind of online arrangement assistance.
That's a really astute point,
contextualize it a little bit.
The GPL and the Parting Pro Arranger contain the same service listings and the same prices as one another. But with Parting Pro, you're actually building understanding of the services and process during that, in that arranger. Whereas on a Word document or PDF GPL, if you have your basic services up here, and then, 2/3 down the page, you have your transportation charges and how it's laid out. They don't know to skip what's in the middle and go directly there. It's very difficult to navigate. Very difficult.
Yeah. And I think transparency is important, because for a lot of time, we didn't really talk about what we did. Families just think we just pick up the body and cremate and return the ashes. Sometimes they think we've picked up the body and already cremated, right? Like there's so many. And so obviously our profession has always been not very transparent, maybe, in the work it takes for what we do, right? Like we paint a pretty serene picture for our families and don't go into details. And so I know transparency is important, but I think we have to contextualize it if we're going to post it online through some kind of online arrangement process, I think would be most helpful. And I know there's other probably software out there. I
do think that context is what matters. And whether you're doing an arranger or just putting stuff online, like that context is, in Deathcare, I've found, even me personally, to be very difficult to really just put on a singular web page or, in a 10-second like pitch to somebody. Like it's really difficult. And the more that we're forced to put certain things online, I don't know if that really solves a lot of the problems of transparency that we're really hoping it will. At least that's where I'm coming from. But you know, I don't know maybe they're going to come up with this really elegant solution to saying every funeral home has to post this. And all of a sudden now all of the families are now equipped with enough context to make a great decision. But I can't imagine that they're going to be able to do that. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Say we post it online and then the basic service fee, which is non-declinable, and the family calls and says, we don't need that because we just want a direct cremation, you know, and not understanding maybe what the basic service fee of funeral director and staff really means, right? Because that's the number one question we get.
Context matters a lot, and it's going to be really hard to figure out what the right context is to show.
Yeah. And will it create a competitive advantage or disadvantage? Don't know.
So as, you know, COO of Fairmount, can you kind of describe what you're doing there? I know you're doing a lot already amongst all the other things. And I'm sure this one is one of the more...
about your job. Yeah.
Yeah. We spent an hour talking about all the things you're doing on the side. So now,
now I'll get to the meat. Yeah.
My chief executive officer, David Idner, promoted me a year ago to chief operating officer. And it is probably the most rewarding and challenging role I've ever done in my career. Obviously, it has to be. It's a very important one in our organization. So my role is to oversee all of the operations, including HR, marketing, along in collaboration with the CEO. We work together and with the executive team here at Fairmount, which we have so many talented leaders, very grateful for each and every one of them. The biggest transition, of course, where we were peers, and now I'm kind of in the supervisory role, but they were very supportive and we were friends before and we're still friends. And I kind of see myself more as for the leadership team, the executive team, I see myself almost as a peer mentor as opposed to like, I'm the boss now. We obviously have roles and we're very respectful of our roles, but I see myself more as like, hey, more as working together. I learn more from them than they probably learn from me. And so my primary role is just overseeing our 5 funeral homes and 7 cemeteries and just making sure we're taking care of our families, running the daily operations, and then also being part of the executive team's strategic plans and how to continue to grow. We are a nonprofit, so nobody owns us. So what I love about the nonprofit is we get to have a lot of fun doing this because nobody benefits from everything we do goes back into our businesses. Because we're community owned, we give back to our community. I remember when I was interviewing for the job, the CEO gave me I asked for the values mission of the organization. And then the top, it said, be the change you want to see in the world by Mahatma Gandhi. And that was all it took for me to say yes, because I think it aligns with my personal values of just the humanity and the people part of it. I love people and relationships. I value that most in life. And so just being able to give back to our community. So we do a lot of community outreach. We just got a list of all of our events between now and December. And awesome. I think we're doing something almost every week, whether we're attending events in the community or having events at our facilities. The one that's going to be our first one and the most exciting one to see how that works out is our spooky wine tour. So we're going to have wine and we're going to have this MC that's going to walk people through. I think we're planning on having a hayride and taking people through the cemetery and giving them a history. Because like us as a cemetery in Spokane, we're almost the guardians, as one employee says, the guardians of Spokane's history. Because a lot of prominent people that have developed this community is in our care. And the reason we do things in our cemeteries specifically is we don't want people to be forgotten, right? So everyone in our care, they do get visited, but we want people to feel comfortable and safe in our cemeteries. And then to not forget all of the thousands of people buried in our
I do
cemeteries.
have to give it up to, I'm sure funeral homes do stuff too, but even the local cemetery around me, they put on these events for like Halloween where they give out pumpkins, and there's these huge like events, and like the whole community comes, and it really, I feel like, normalizes being on a cemetery. You see how beautiful it is, and I really applaud you guys in doing these events because they always end up being really nice. And really, I feel like spread the word about how amazing it could be.
Yeah, we're very fortunate with our marketing. Candace, who's our marketing director, gets a lot of this credit, and her team. Her passion just exudes in her work, and we all get to benefit in the community. But when the motives, there's really no motive, so to speak, financially. Obviously, we're a business and we want to do well enough to continue to maintain our business, but that is not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to serve our community. It just has a different feel to it because the pressure isn't to continue to just keep making money. That's not the focus. The focus is to serve. And through service, I think success does come, even though a leader once told me they don't believe that. And I do believe that
Admirable.
if you serve,
I think it's
the
the
money
best
will
attitude to have. In keeping with that sentiment about service, I want to ask you our kind of capstone question to the podcast. What do you think Deathcare looks like in 10 years?
Well, I think none of us were prepared for the pandemic. And I think that has changed things for all of us, right? Not just in Deathcare, but as human beings and the way we see the world. And I think, in Deathcare, we're going to have to really rethink of the way we were doing things pre-pandemic. I think a lot of us have made some shifts, but I think we have to now realize that the folks that are coming into the profession may not have the same ideals as those that have been doing it for 30 years, right? So we've got to create room and space. I think Deathcare will look something more reflective of the people that are in the business as opposed to an image that we have to maintain because we always did it this way, or we're the last to change, right? But it's kind of interesting because technology isn't always our friend. We're funeral directors. We're not tech gurus. But what happened when they took away all of our ability to do our job regularly? We figured it out. And so I think what's going to happen is we're going to have folks that are going to come into our death space that are innovators, and that will help us continue to move where we've already started utilizing technology more. I anticipate that. 5-10 years ago, they talked about the baby boomers and us not being prepared for them. So that's going to be interesting as well in the next 10 years. Can we handle that when that starts? Are we in the middle? Are we at the beginning? Have we dealt with that population yet? They always talked about the baby boomers and not being prepared.
I think that is a very well thought out answer.
Yeah, that's a really good one, Sandra. Thank you.
So Sandra, where can people find you, find the Deathcare Collective, get active with CANA? Where are some of those places, links, anything?
The Deathcare Collective and CANA are on all social media platforms. So Facebook, LinkedIn. I know the Deathcare Collective, we have Instagram. We're trying to dabble in TikTok. And you can find me personally on LinkedIn. So I do have a LinkedIn profile. Other than that, you can contact me through our website here at Fairmount Memorial Association.
No, hard
I
no.
probably shouldn't
Hard
give out
no,
my cell phone
Sandra.
number, so I'll stop there. Yeah.
It's very nice of you. It's very kind
trusting.
of you.
I'm like, I'm going to stop. Yeah. Yes, I'm working on creating
putting your cell phone out
boundaries and
there.
saying no more.
Cool.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Sandra. I think a lot of the work that you are doing and have done has been very inspiring, and I'm excited to see what more you're going to do because I know you're not done. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
No, you're natural. You're a natural.
That's
great. Yeah. No worries.
I appreciate you guys thinking of me and giving me the opportunity to share my story.
All right. Well, for Will DeMichaelis, I'm Tyler Yamasaki. This is the Direct Cremation Podcast. Thank you for listening. Catch you guys next time. Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you ever want to know more, please find us at directcremation.com.